June 2009. Somewhere in the humming cold of Google's data centers, a single line of code blinked to life, and almost blinked out the entire future of online video. But to understand how close we came to losing YouTube, you have to go back further, back to a time when the platform wasn't the world's stage but a chaotic Wild West of cat videos, pirated music clips, and shaky footage of kids falling off skateboards. It was a place where copyright was an afterthought, and lawyers hadn't yet caught up to meme culture. But that was about to change. Earlier that year, in a courtroom filled with the sterile scent of litigation, Viacom, one of the biggest media empires of the 20th century, filed a lawsuit so large it made headlines beyond the tech world. They claimed YouTube was built on stolen content, Comedy Central clips, MTV performances, entire Nickelodeon episodes that racked up millions of views before being yanked down. Or not. Viacom's lawyers calculated damages in the billions. If they won, YouTube wouldn't just pay, it would bleed out. And so, under pressure from every angle, YouTube's engineers got to work on what they believed was their lifeline: a new copyright detection system. Something smarter, faster, more aggressive. Its mission: to scan every second of uploaded content and wipe anything even remotely suspicious. They called it Content ID. To the public, it sounded like a fix. To those behind the glass walls of Googleplex meeting rooms, it was a ticking bomb. On June 15, 2009, they flipped the switch. What happened next didn't feel like a system update. It felt like an extinction event. In the span of minutes, tens of thousands of videos vanished. Not because they were illegal, but because the system couldn't tell the difference between a stolen song and someone humming it. Movie clips? Gone. Fan edits? Gone. Educational fair use commentary? Gone. The algorithm, in its cold logic, treated nuance like noise. And for a moment, it looked like it wasn't stopping. Inside the ops room, as screens flashed error codes and takedown logs stacked by the second, one junior engineer reportedly muttered, "We just killed YouTube." It wasn't hyperbole. Traffic plummeted. Creators panicked. Some threatened lawsuits of their own. Forums filled with rage and conspiracy theories. Had Google sabotaged the very platform it bought for $1.65 billion? Was this a silent corporate coup to turn YouTube into a sterile, ad-friendly wasteland? But the worst was still unfolding. Somewhere deep in the automation scripts, buried under layers of fail-safes, a critical flaw had gone unnoticed. Content ID wasn't just flagging copyrighted videos. It had started targeting system files, back-end metadata, critical infrastructure that told the servers what to play, when to play it, and how to serve it to users worldwide. If left unchecked, YouTube wouldn't just be empty. It wouldn't exist. And here's where the story fractures into rumor and whisper. Some say a senior Google engineer, a man whose name remains redacted in internal memos, caught the bug seconds before disaster. Others claim a failsafe, buried deep in Google's internal redundancy systems, shut the process down automatically when it detected recursive deletions. Either way, the algorithm froze. The bleeding stopped. But the damage was done. By dawn, YouTube looked like a wasteland. Millions of views had disappeared overnight. Some of the platform's earliest viral relics, historical firsts of internet culture, were gone, lost in the purge. Engineers scrambled to restore backups, but many were partial, fragmented, like trying to reassemble a shattered mirror with your eyes closed. Meanwhile, in public, YouTube downplayed the chaos. They called it a routine update, but creators weren't buying it. Rumors spread of shadow deletions, quiet censorship. Some users claimed their accounts were wiped without warning. Others posted screenshots of long-forgotten videos being flagged for music they never used. Across Reddit, 4chan, and early Twitter threads, people asked the same question. If Google could erase the world's largest video archive with the push of a button, what else could they do? And then came the internal debate that would define YouTube's future. In those frantic hours, executives faced a choice: double down on automation or pull back and admit defeat. Some argued that without aggressive copyright enforcement, lawsuits like Viacom's would eventually bankrupt the platform. Others warned that an overzealous algorithm would alienate the very creators who made YouTube valuable in the first place. Caught in the middle were the engineers, exhausted, sleep-deprived, staring at screens filled with red error logs. They weren't philosophers, they were problem solvers. And right now, they had a broken system bleeding user trust. But there was no clear fix. Turning off Content ID entirely could open the floodgates to new lawsuits. Leaving it on meant risking another deletion cascade. So they did what Google does best. They re-engineered the system on the fly, code rewrites at 3 a.m., hot patches pushed live while millions watched, new exceptions, new thresholds, emergency backups. For days, the platform wobbled on a knife's edge. Some videos returned, others never did. And yet, behind the code and chaos, something else was happening, something far more dangerous. Rivals were watching. Vimeo, Dailymotion, even Facebook's fledgling video experiments. They saw blood in the water. If YouTube couldn't stabilize itself, someone else would seize the throne of online video. Billions of ad dollars were at stake. And for a fleeting moment, the future of internet entertainment was up for grabs. But then, almost as quickly as it began, the crisis faded from headlines. YouTube stabilized, the lawsuits dragged on, and users, hungry for distraction, kept uploading, commenting, watching, as if nothing had happened. But behind the curtain, the cracks remained, and the people who had stared into the abyss of deletion would never forget. Until, nearly a decade later, something else resurfaced. A second bug, eerily familiar, buried in YouTube's growing sea of algorithms. A new threat that could trigger the same collapse, but on a global scale. But that is where our story continues. October 2018. Silicon Valley was colder now. Not the weather, the atmosphere. The internet had changed. Algorithms ruled everything. Facebook was choking on political scandals. Twitter was a battlefield of outrage. But YouTube had evolved into the largest stage in human history. 5 billion videos watched per day. More content uploaded in an hour than most television networks aired in a year. But that scale came with shadows. On an ordinary Tuesday, somewhere deep in YouTube's sprawling server farms, an anomaly flickered to life. Engineers called it the self-termination loop. To outsiders, it sounded like science fiction. To those reading the raw server logs, it looked like a slow-motion disaster. A background process designed to clean up old, unlisted, and inactive videos. Something routine, something safe, had started to misfire. Its logic had decayed. What should have been a simple sweep of digital dust turned into an uncontrollable purge. And unlike 2009, the stakes were infinitely higher. Because this time it wasn't just forgotten videos, it was private archives, academic lectures, independent journalism from war zones, entire careers of creators whose channels held millions of subscribers, family memories, wedding footage, lost voices from extinct communities. Gone. It was as if YouTube's nervous system was eating itself alive. At first, no one believed the scope. Engineers dismissed early alerts as false positives. But then, the reports flooded in. A Brazilian history channel wiped out overnight. Niche educational content from Japan gone without warning. Old viral relics, video fossils from YouTube's chaotic birth, erased in the silence of the night. And again, a terrible realization dawned. The deletion process wasn't just removing content, it was overwriting backup indexes. Meaning, once gone, these videos couldn't be recovered. Not from public archives, not from Google's cold storage, not from anywhere. Inside Google's headquarters, where hallways stretched long and silent at 3 a.m., a handful of senior engineers gathered around glowing monitors. They stared at cascading logs, millions of deletion requests queued up by the minute. One of them, according to internal accounts, broke the silence with a single question. What if we shut it all down? Not just the process, the servers, the entire platform. A total system freeze, the digital equivalent of pulling the plug on a patient mid-surgery. But that came with its own dangers. YouTube wasn't a toy anymore. It was woven into education, news, entertainment, and global infrastructure. Turning it off, even for hours, could cause worldwide panic. Stock markets, streaming services, smart TVs, thousands of dependent businesses, billions in ad revenue. But leaving it on meant losing control. And that's when the story splits again, between what we know and what we suspect. Some insiders claim the shutdown happened, a silent blackout in a slice of YouTube's core regions. Not visible to users, but deep inside the network. A surgical isolation to stop the spread of the purge. Others insist the crisis was contained by a last-minute manual override, a legacy admin panel buried deep in Google's backend, untouched for years, that allowed a handful of senior staff to kill the rogue processes before it was too late. What's clear is this: for several tense hours, the future of YouTube, and perhaps the video-based internet itself, hung by a thread. And outside, the world had no idea. Content creators kept uploading. Viewers kept scrolling. Advertisers kept bidding. But somewhere in the shadows of Google's vast empire, a handful of engineers knew how close the collapse had come. Again. The next morning, a vague update appeared in Google's developer blog. Routine maintenance improvements to optimize archival systems. No mention of the mass deletions, no mention of the failsafes triggered in the dead of night. But in creator forums, the whispers started again. Why had thousands of unlisted videos disappeared without explanation? Why did some channels report data loss in private playlists and archives? And why, years later, did YouTube still never fully explain the events of that night? Some said it was simple technical debt, a consequence of a platform growing too fast for its own good. Others saw something deeper: the growing fear that no digital archive, no matter how massive, is truly safe. That everything we build on the internet exists on borrowed time, balanced on fragile code and human oversight. In the years that followed, YouTube rebuilt its backend. Layers upon layers of redundancy. AI-assisted monitoring, automated backups on cold storage grids scattered across continents. But the ghost of those two near deletions never left. They became internal cautionary tales, quiet legends whispered to new engineers during onboarding, stories of the days when YouTube almost deleted itself, not because of hackers, not because of lawsuits, but because of its own blind ambition. Because sometimes the greatest threat to a machine is itself. Today, we scroll past countless videos without thinking. Tutorials, vlogs, newsreels, songs, rants, art, propaganda, and confessions. Hours of our lives stitched into the endless scroll. But if you pause, really pause, and listen beneath the hum of your recommended feed, you might hear it. The faint echo of a platform that almost erased itself from history, and the unspoken question that still lingers in the air. What happens when the world's largest stage forgets its own script?